It's my pleasure to call to order the the June 16th, 2022 meeting of the Thompson-Nicola Regional District Board of Directors. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations communities across our vast regional district. And today we're located on the Secwepemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with the Secwepemc and respect the territory and land on which we gather today. In terms of announcements, the Thompson-Nicola Regional Library is gearing up for its Summer Reading Club, which opens registration on June 20th. This year's theme is All Together Now and offers a reading club option for all ages from infants to adults. In addition, the TNRL communities will see an expansion of the group Summer Reading Club, which allows childcare facilities to participate and prioritize reading over the summer. Programming will focus on family fun and community togetherness. Other than that, the only announcement I have is that Director Brown and I attended a meeting with the leader of the official opposition in Ottawa, Candace Bergen, the interim leader, I think I would have to say, to be perfectly correct about it. And she was gathering information, as much as information as she could, on the devastation suffered by both the city of Merritt and the area along Highway 8 between Merritt and Spence's Bridge. So she seemed to be keenly interested in the question. She was accompanied by Mr. Caputo, Frank Caputo from the Kamloops riding. So perhaps she'll take some of that information back with her to Ottawa and see if she can exert some pressure on the feds to help these areas that have been so heavily impacted. In terms of upcoming meetings and events, on June 17th, we have a committee of the whole meeting. According to my calendar, that's tomorrow morning. And on July the 14th, we have a regular board meeting. In your blue folders today, you will find any mail addressed to you, particularly TNRD annual report, the BC Summer Reading Club handout. Are there any additions to or deletions from the agenda? I'm seeing none. That takes us to the minutes.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried. Delegations and invited presentations. We have Creative BC here with the Provincial Film Commission. There's a presentation from Marty G, BC Film Commissioner and Director of Production Services, and Julie Strangeland, the Regional Lead. And I'm kind of looking forward to that. We can proceed with that forthwith.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having us join you today. It's also an exciting evening event, I think, as some of you may know. So we're just really excited to be up in the Thompson-Nicola Regional District. It's such an important part of BC's production community, and certainly is a showcase for British Columbia and motion picture industry. So Creative BC, we are the catalyst for the creative sectors in the province. We work very closely under tourism, arts, and sport and culture under Minister Mark. We amalgamated with the tax credit program to become Creative BC, that was previously the BC Film Commission. And we oversee book and magazine publishing, interactive and digital media, magazine publishing, music and sound recording. But today we're here to talk to you about motion picture and the industry in the province. So as a branch of Film Commission, we're here to sort of bring production into the province and support it while it's here. We work very closely with municipal film offices, our provincial government, regional film commissions. We've got more slides on that, and really to promote the province's reputation as a world-class filming location. So we don't really get asked this question anymore because everyone knows when we go to Los Angeles why they're choosing British Columbia, but we have a obviously a very close, quick flight from Los Angeles. We have a very strong labor-based tax incentive program that's about BC workers. Very experienced, high caliber crew. They've been, working for 40 years on production and are renowned. We have an amazing world of looks, and that's obviously thanks to the amazing looks throughout the province, including the Thompson-Nicola and everything it has to offer. We have the studio and infrastructure, and we have a great reputation for stability and specifically within our tax incentive program, and a real reputation for being film friendly from the regional film commissions and the provincial film commission and film offices, as well as our communities and neighborhoods that we work very closely with to make sure that we're welcome.
Yeah. We just kind of included a report done by the Motion Picture Association Canada about a feature film that was filmed in BC. It's a couple of years ago now, pre-COVID, but I wanted to share it with you because this particular film kind of went a little bit over the province and the island and the lower mainland, as opposed to just kind of sticking to one local area. They were all over the place. And if anybody's interested, that we can always provide more information about the economic impact reports that the MPA does. But this just kind of gives a little bit of a breakdown about what the productions typically actually spend when they're filming in a jurisdiction, as well as highlighting the number of jobs that were filled by local BC residents, whether they live in the lower mainland and are part of that industry there, or if they live out in the regions and work on regional shows when they show up. With Hedgehog in particular, that amounted to $22 million just in wages for the time that they were here. They were on the island quite a bit, over in Campbell River and Nanaimo, in the lower mainland, obviously, but that extended up into Squamish for quite a significant chunk in Belcarra. And they did a really big piece on Highway 19 on Vancouver Island. That meant that they spent a lot of time over there. And it was very exciting. Well, we did. So just a little bit about the actual work the Provincial Film Commission does. We sort of break things down into a few different departments. Our production service department is the first point of call for a producer who might be considering filming in the province. That team does script breakdowns. They provide location packages, which are specific tailor-made brochures basically for the producer to show how and where they might film their project and be able to achieve everything they need to do creatively as they're looking at different jurisdictions. To sort of show the BC edge that they can get. So when they do that work, they draw from our locations library, which is managed by Creative BC, but each of our regional film commissions also have their own gallery within that library that they use, again, to market their regions for producers who are creating inquiries. And the regional film commissioners connect with our location consultants at the Provincial Film Commission as well, when producers show an interest to be out in the regions for creative reasons. Often there are looks in the regions that we can't quite manage in the lower mainland. And so that is the benefit of the regional film commissions, is that on the ground work and knowledge that they can provide. And just, oh, was that me that just turned it off? Thank you. The industry and community affairs team is a very relationship network oriented team that work on policy, whether it's provincial, municipal, regional government, even down to specific locations that might have filming guidelines and policies. And this means that we interact with a number of different ministries who tend to say that they're not in the film industry until suddenly a film wants to be on the highway, and then they are in the film industry. So that tends to be the industry and community affairs work, is that relationships building and maintaining this sort of film friendliness. Real Green is an initiative that's been in process for 16 years now, but just over the past 5 or 6 years, it has gone through a real reinvigoration in terms of a new strategic plan, which we're in 3.0 of right now, and has moved in-house at Creative BC. And then Creative Pathways, we'll talk about both of these in a minute, is an industry initiative to help demystify getting into the industry and what that can look like.
So here's our great province, as we all know and can see the shape of, and it just goes to show the 8 regional film commissions that our team gets to work very closely with throughout the province. And again, as Julie mentioned, all have very specific knowledge of their areas. They have the relationships with municipalities and the regional areas and the communities and First Nations communities, which is so integral to making sure that when productions leave the Lower Mainland or sometimes just come up into the regions to do all of their filming, take advantage of their regional and distant tax credits, that they are getting that same that same level of community service and support from the regional film commissions. It's very seamless. It's been 35 plus years now that we've been working with the regional film commissions, and it's such an integral part of BC's brand that we have people that are knowledgeable and experts in their field in each of the regions. So we're very grateful for our regional film commissions and very excited that we have such a great relationship with them and their trusted resources in those areas.
So just to highlight the Real Green Initiative, which is growing, obviously, as collectively, we all realize we need to work a lot harder to keep our world sustainable. And when we talk about sustainable film, that has a number of different elements to it, but the environmental sustainability is really kind of top part. The initiative is supported by industry partners. They all pay in order to keep the initiative moving along, and have an advisory committee that then help us shape the program and the strategy plan, and then what the logistics of actually, doing the work looks like. And so currently the key initiatives that have been receiving a lot of work and attention are the Clean Energy Committee, which actually we had a little meeting with Sarah Candido, who is the film liaison for the city of Kamloops this morning, and saw some nice synergy for the work that Sarah is doing, where she's kind of jumping in to be modern, like right up next to us in terms of trying to find ways of implementing clean energy solutions for productions when they're filming on location. There's a national certification process that is being built and will hopefully be in place in the reasonably near distant future. Planet placement is a focus that's more about the creative content, but really acknowledging that the films and television influence culture, and they influence our attitudes, and they can really help propel social change. And so planet placement is one of the focuses that help creators of content really understand their influence and include it in their work. And the Real Earth Day Challenge is a fundraising program that's now in its second year now to help give back to the parks and regional areas in the Lower Mainland currently at the moment that film productions use quite a bit as filming locations. And we do have, this is our current strategic plan. Just the focuses of the transformation of the industry, really dialing down to get to a point where we can start to say that we are close to zero emissions, and focusing on a circular economy and really reducing any kind of waste that the industry produces. This is all in alignment and partnership and collaboration with other provinces across the country and the National Real Green Committee that we chair with Ontario Green Screen. I'm so sorry, we're almost out of time, but.
And so quickly, the other initiative we wanted to talk about is Creative Pathways, Canada.com. If anyone says, how do I get into the motion picture industry? Historically it's been, oh, let me talk to my cousin or brother, I'm not really sure. And you approach some of the labor organizations, and it's, so Creative Pathways Canada really breaks it down. We've worked with our labor organizations, our provincial government, to really showcase all the different jobs there are in the industry. And we're talking about mostly the crafts and trades people, below the line, above the line, directors, producers. But there's also an area now for to support underrepresented communities and their entrance into the motion picture industry through set works, and also an opportunity to meet and greet people that work in the industry, ask questions, find out. Almost like a concierge or panel opportunities that we're working with labor organizations on as well. Is that it? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, we just were trying to rip through all of that, but just thanks so much for having us here today. We're here to answer any questions. You've obviously got an expert right there as well in her field. So thank you.
So questions first, we have Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. It's great. I'm just wondering your thoughts on building if there was a full capacity service film studio in Kamloops, the impact that might have. Would it be significant for our area, do you think, or at least get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it would be significant, absolutely. And, you know, we've got a lot of stage space coming online throughout the province on Vancouver Island and in the Lower Mainland, but that is the growth that we're driving for. And it goes hand in hand with workforce development as well. And again, Vicky's done some great work in terms of the training that some of the other regional film commissions have gone, but we can absolutely, through Creative BC and through myself and my team, connect anyone that might be interested in having more fulsome conversations with some of our partners and the purpose-built sound stages in the Lower Mainland that might come up, or have a conversation with anyone that might be interested in doing that. You know, we really feel that it is time now. We're seeing that regions like the Thompson-Nicola, the Okanagan, and Vancouver Island really are that next tier outside of the Lower Mainland, and they reflect that, to Julie's point earlier, you know, the Metro Vancouver is amazing, but it doesn't have a lot of the things that our regions have. And there's also, you know, urban centers and communities in the regions as well that would reflect some of the looks that creatively that production would have. So as the film commissioner, I would say absolutely yes, but obviously the dollars need to make sense. It's pretty tight in the Lower Mainland right now with commercial real estate prices. So I think if there's opportunity and there's civic owned or private ownership that is interested in doing it, then we'd be happy to have a conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for either of our presenters? I'm not seeing any. I'll take the opportunity to thank you ever so much for bringing this to us and for your presentation. And indeed, I share your enthusiasm for the notion, pardon me, of a film studio in the greater Kamloops area. I think it would be a fantastic addition to our regional district, whether it's within the city or not. So thanks once again for coming and speaking to us.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much.
That brings us to building infraction expired permit 441 Rue Cheval Noir. There's Sean Tyndall and Frank Tyndall. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to this matter? Ms. Campbell, have we received any written submissions?
We have not, Chair Gillis.
Okay. Building infraction expired. I don't have to ask 3 times on this one, do I? No, I didn't think so. Thank you. Building infraction expired permit 1824 Pine Grove Road. Jesse Bellinger, is there anyone here wishing to speak with respect to this matter? I see no one. Ms. Campbell, are there any written submissions?
We didn't receive anything, Chair Gillis.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us then to the unfinished business of the first one, building infraction at 441 Rue Cheval Noir. There's a report from the General Manager of Development Services and a recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion, Director Watson?
This is on the aside, although I can guess where Rue Cheval Noir is, the next one is on Pine Grove Road, and there's no description of what EA that is in. And if we could have that, we would have a heads up on what we're looking at a little bit better. Thank you.
I think Director Watson, I've already had that discussion with staff. I think we discussed it during the agenda review, and your suggestion is a good one. It's going to be, I think in future, they told me that it is going to be, these are going to include the area in which the alleged infraction is taking place. So yeah, thanks. So it's moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Takes us to the next one, 1824 Pine Grove Road. There is a recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I'm seeing none. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. That takes us to the board remuneration bylaw, 2022 bylaw 2771. There's a report from the chief financial officer and a recommendation. And I understand that Ms. Campbell is going to speak to this matter.
Chair Gillis, I'll let Mr. Ray speak to this, but if there's any questions that may be more appropriate for myself or Mr. Hildebrand to answer, then we can do that.
Very well, Mr. Ray.
Thank you, Chair. So the 2022 remuneration bylaw, as I mentioned at the hospital district meeting this morning, one of the main sort of structural changes with this is to separate the clause that deals with board expenses and put it into a policy, a board policy, and have the remuneration bylaw strictly deal with the remuneration compensation for time. Otherwise, in terms of the actual changes to the content, the annual indemnities throughout the bylaw would be indexed based on CPI in 2021, as we always go with the previous fiscal year or calendar year CPI for BC, which was 2.8%. And the per meeting indemnities would increase from 160 per meeting to 170 per meeting. And that's, again, a catch up based on CPI as an indication of an increase in cost of living. The last time that was done was in 2019. So this is recognition of the increase in the cost of living that's happened 2019 to 2022. The other piece that's a little different is having to do with the travel time remuneration. Historically, in the calculation of the annual amount that each director receives, there was a piece included in there for the travel to and from meetings, where it was averaged out over the year. And that was based on, historically, all our meetings were always held in person. And that's not always the case anymore. And so in an effort to be more transparent and clear about how that remuneration is occurring, rather than averaging it out, the proposal is that instead of building it into the annual, it will be paid on a per occasion basis. So when directors attend a meeting in person, they'll get paid for the travel time. And if they're attending by Zoom, as some directors are today, they will not. And I think that just keeps it, very clear and easy to understand for taxpayers. That's primarily the gist of the changes in the remuneration bylaw this year.
Thank you, Director Walsh.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like everybody was here this morning, so I won't go on, but I do want to make a motion to leave the CPI increase as it is on an annual basis. I don't see any real, you can say it's more efficient, but I think each board, especially that we're going through an election, and it will be, I think it's a substantial different board look next year. They should have the freedom to decide on their own remuneration on an annual basis. And so I disagree with it. It's automatically built in. I think there should be a place for discussion and debate and, or amendments, whatever they want to do. So I would make an amendment that we remove the automatic portion of that and leave it as it was, that it would be reviewed annually.
Motion on the floor.
That would be my motion, an amendment motion. Oh, there's not a motion, okay, but how do you, so I have to wait till somebody moves the whole thing, because I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Chair Gillis through to Director Walsh. So if we move first and second reading, after second reading is when changes can be made, and it doesn't need to be an amendment. You just make a motion for those changes. And then if those changes are accepted, then the bylaw would be read again a third time as amended. So perhaps if a board member is able to move first and second reading, then Director Walsh can make his motion.
So as I understand it, the recommendation number 1 would have to be moved and passed, and then recommendation number 2 would be moved, seconded, and discussed. Is that correct? The amendment would come then?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Watson.
Long ago and far away, or not so far away, I believe that this board asked for this is way before you guys. We asked for a public assessment of how our taxpayers would like our payments to be made and how much we should get paid. And I don't recall it going anywhere, but I'd really like to get some public opinion on who should be setting our wages. As I am not my own employer, I work for the residents of Area E. It would be really nice if they got to determine how much I got paid.
Okay. Is there any further discussion with respect to recommendation number 1? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Let the record show that directors Watson, Rothenberger, and Walsh are opposed. And Director Bass, sorry, Director Bass, didn't see you up there. So that carries.
Yeah.
Director Rothenberger.
I can speak up. So we've combined first and second reading.
Oh,
So,
I'm sorry.
yep, the first recommendation is moved first.
Okay,
and
then this
second
is
reading.
indeed the time for,
And
I'm
so-
sorry, Director Rothenberger, that's
Any amendments?
quite different from the one we dealt with this morning.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I would like to move that there be no increases in remuneration for 2022, including indemnities, committee meetings, special meetings, conventions, seminars, and workshops.
Second. That's me.
Yep, we hear you, Director Bass. So that's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Rothenberger.
Just speaking to the motion, Mr. Chair, I think we're still in a time when we have to understand that we are continuing to work on regaining public trust and confidence in how this board conducts itself. And part of that, I think, is showing some leadership to demonstrate that we are not an entitled board and that we are willing to hold the line on what we're compensated with. You will recall, Mr. Chair, that it wasn't that long ago that the board voted itself a 19% increase for rural directors and 11% for municipal directors. That was just a couple of years ago. So the board is doing okay, in my view, as far as remuneration is concerned. Also remind the board that in April of 2020, I attempted to convince the board that we should take a 20% pay cut in order to demonstrate leadership during the pandemic. That was rejected. So there wasn't a lot of leadership there. But in 2021, thankfully, the board did vote not to give itself an increase of any kind. That was leadership. Now, that leadership came in the midst of a lot of pressure that the board was under to reassure the public that we were listening. And just one further point, that the Barefoot Bistro is still very much in the public's mind. And I think we really need to show that we are willing to hold the line on ourselves.
Thanks, Director Rothenberger. Is there any further discussion with respect to the amendment? Director Watson?
Thank you.
Yeah.
We are not just bearing the brunt of our history. We are under severe inflation. And so are our constituents, where they have to pay their taxes and then they have no control over what we do with their taxes. And I'd like to see us at least having some responsibility and pulling in our horns on what we're doing with their tax money.
Thank you, Director Singh.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. I think that, so first of all, I said consistently over the years, I haven't supported these motions because of the things that Director Watson's talking about. I think that one of the best practices would probably be go back to the communities and have a citizens committee or something, as we've had in other jurisdictions, to actually help us frame this up. It's always a decision of the board ultimately anyways, puts us in an awkward place. I don't agree with Director Rothenberger that we're still wearing this. I think that the board has actually done incredible work running the ship. So I think we should be proud of that, in my feeling. I reflected on that quite a bit last couple of weeks because I'm running for election in Kamloops or election in Kamloops. I think to myself, we have actually worked very, very hard to work to rectify us with problems of the past, and we should be proud of that. So this is actually, my concerns around this predate the last 3-4 years of work on the board. And so I was supporting the amendment, but not because of the reasons that Dr. Rothenberger has put forward mainly.
Thank you. Director Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaking against the amendment, in my opinion, and that's what it is now is the time to do that. The perfect time for the public to challenge it is at election time. And I believe that's a couple of months away from here, or 3 months. And if the communities have concern about that, that would be the time to challenge it. And the new director can run all that. Those guys are paying themselves too much. I'll lower it. One of the most difficult things to do, as we all know, every time we do this, it's one of the hardest things that we do is try to set a reasonable wage. We did a bit of a count at lunchtime, and there appears to be a very large turnover, imminent, whatever that word is, in the composition of this board. And I would not like to suddenly dump their wages on top of a brand new board when they're still in the learning process. It is better to do it now and then let it be an election issue. And even if I was running again, I would still have this particular position. People have told me, for what you do, you don't get paid enough. So there's obviously quite a difference between far rural areas and local areas. And having said that, I just can't support that amendment, Mel. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Quinn. Director Bass.
Thanks. Going at this point means everyone said everything I wanted to say. However, I would note that I wish I'd lived in Director Singh's world, because I still hear about this constantly from people, and not just the echo chamber that hates everyone. I hear this from friends as well who are still wondering. I see in our this policy something I've never seen before and was unaware of, that you can get money just for the length of time you're going to be flying to a convention. And I didn't know that. That disturbs me as well. I think that everything that Director Rothenberger has said is accurate. And to be honest, I don't think I would want to go into an election campaign if I was an EA director or a municipal director, counting on people just to be mad at me because of what we're making. I would rather they be looking at the actual fundamental issues. And this is a time to show leadership and accept the fact that we're still being watched. We're still under a microscope, and we still have an awful lot to make up for.
Thank you, Director Laird.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question through to our financial officer. How does our remuneration compare to other regional districts with the same basically size and what we do? Did you do a comparison to see where we're at?
Mr. Ray.
Through the chair, I haven't done a comparison of that nature since 2019. That was the last time we did one. Typically, we do it once every election cycle, so once every 4 years or so. When we did it in 2019, we were lagging behind the neighboring regional districts, and we did do an adjustment, as Director Rothenberger mentioned, to get back to the average, back to not being the top paid, not being the bottom paid, but being the average of the surrounding regional districts. And the intent is to do another such comparison next year. But in the in-between years, what our neighbors are doing is applying a CPI increase as a objective measurement of the cost of living increase, which is what this would be.
Thanks, Mr. Ray. I wonder, at what point was the stipend increased in response to the federal government's move to deny the deductibility of a portion of the stipend? Is that not the increase that Director Rothenberger referred to?
In a way, the answer is not quite so straightforward. We brought that question to the board at the time. It took effect January 2019. And we brought that question to the board in 2018, prior to that election. And the board directed me at that time, we don't want to look at that this year. Worry about it in the future. In 2019, we did a comparison to our neighboring regional districts. And many other local governments at that time had done an adjustment not to increase the amount of money that the elected officials were taking home, but to keep it the same once additional taxation was collected. And so when we did that comparison, we found we were no longer at the average because they had increased theirs and we had not. So we were maintaining our longstanding practice of targeting to be at the average.
Thanks, Mr. Ray. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It kind of seems to me that we are still trying to make up for something that we didn't do. And so when I look at 2019 to now, I can tell you that there's a lot of people out there that are happy with what we've done over the last year. I can tell you that there's a lot of people are saying, there's no way I'd run for regional district. They don't pay me anything. I'd be better off running for council. So when I look at it from that point of view, and I'm thinking, oh gosh, I'd like to have some younger folks put their names up for election this year. And they say, oh, that's just not enough money for an EA director to do all the things that electoral area directors do and are responsible for. So I am going to vote for this only because I'd like to hope that some of the younger people in the communities will think that maybe they're going to get paid for the amount of work that they do.
Thanks, Director Elliott, but you left me confused. Did you say you are not voting for the amendment? You're voting against the amendment?
I'm voting against the amendment.
Thank you. Okay. Director Rice, sorry. Ms. Campbell, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. I can comment after if Director Rice has a comment. I
Thank
just wanted to
you. I've got
respond.
Director Rice and I think Director Quinn. And
Okay.
that's all I've got on the list, following which I'll call the question. Now, Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. As I look around this room, I see a lot of hardworking folks that I've been with for 10 years now, and some just a few years. But that being said, I think our employers, which is the people that elected us, get good value for their money. I mean, we get paid not a lot. The next level of government, MLAs and MPs, you add a zero to what we get paid, and you might be close, a little closer than we are. But that being said, I agree with what Director Rothenberger said. I think now is the time to put on the brakes and have some representative to our constituents, our employers, the people that elected us, and let them know that we hear them. And so I will be supporting his amendment.
Thank you. Director Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Through the forensic audit, not one of the people around this table was found to be in fault. So I think we're clean, and I think what we've done is good. But I do have a question through the chair to Mr. Ray. Who pays what when it comes to stipends, please? Does the board, general administration pay the basic, and then the electoral areas just pay their share through electoral admin? I think there's a split in there somewhere.
Yes, through the chair, you're right, it is split. There's a base amount that is paid for through the general administration service that everyone pays into. And then the electoral area directors get an extra amount as part of their annual pay that is paid through the electoral area administration function. So only the electoral area taxpayers are paying for that extra.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further hands up for discussion, so I will, oh, sorry, I'm sorry, Ms. Campbell, I forgot you had a comment there.
Thank you, Chair Gillis, and I believe Mr. Hildebrand has a few comments as well. So I just wanted to respond to a couple of comments from Director. So Director Singh's suggestion about having a review or a group be put together to look at compensation, because it's difficult situation to put staff in and the board in to be coming up with what the compensation and remuneration should be. And so I know Mr. Ray has plans to look into that for 2023. But when we do this, we're guided by best practices. And so I think it's important to make the distinction that Mr. Ray's proposing that we align ourselves with other local governments who already have this CPI index increase built into their bylaws or their policies. So it doesn't come back every year to be discussed. It just automatically goes up based on the cost of living, not based on a board or council's performance. And the second thing I just wanted to note, because there's been some discussions about elections coming up and running for office. And so I have had already a significant amount of interest from potential candidates wanting to run for office at the regional district. And there's always questions about what the remuneration is, and potential candidates are listening and paying attention to the conversations that are happening here and in the media around remuneration. And so again, when staff are bringing these changes forward, we're guided by best practices, and UBCM developed some really great guiding principles around this, about the importance of remuneration for those seeking to run for office. It's certainly not the main reason why they run for office, but there's an expectation that they be fairly compensated for running for office. So it's just something to think about as we move into the election season.
Thank you, and Mr. Hildebrand.
Thank you. I certainly don't want to weigh into the debate, but I wanted to also just share a few facts that we've found. We've done significant research on this, and to Director Walsh's comments about this year is certainly a different year with inflation and everything going on. We are one of the only comparators that we found that do not have some type of an index built into this discussion, and we are one of the only ones that bring it back for a debate every year. Whether that's good or bad, that's totally up to the board, but it's something that we are certainly not following any best practices from many other regional districts or municipalities in the research that we have found. So just wanted to make sure that was pointed out as well.
Thank you. And I guess I have two questions for Mr. Ray. The first one is, did this board not vote to forego any increase in 2020 and again in 2021?
This board did forego a CPI increase in 2021. And 2020, the TNRD remuneration bylaw was passed with a CPI increase. But then when it came to the hospital district in 2020, that board opted not to accept any increase. So the hospital district has not had an increase in 2 years. This board has not had an increase in 1 year.
Thank you. And the next question was, if you separate the travel allowance from the stipend, as you suggested, are there tax implications there?
Not really. Separating the travel allowance is more a question of timing. If directors continue to attend meetings in person, they'll continue to receive that stipend. It's really just a question of when it gets paid. It doesn't really have any impact on the income taxes.
Thank you. I think that I get that. Okay. I think Director Singh had one more question or comment, and then following which I'll call the question.
Chair, I'll pass.
Thank you. Then we have before us recommendation number 1. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, but still got the amendment to deal with. I'm sorry, Director Rothenberger's amendment. Right. So we have Director Rothenberger's amendment, which, do you want to read it out again, please, Ms. Campbell?
So I didn't add every single meeting that Director Rothenberger noted. I just noted that there be no increase in remuneration for 2022. Does that
I think it was
cover-
that simple, wasn't it, Director Rothenberger?
Yeah, I was just being specific about what that would cover, but certainly it's the same thing. I added including indemnities, committee meetings, special meetings, conventions, seminars and workshops, just so there's no doubt.
All in favor of Director Rothenberger's amendment? I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Opposed, if any? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The amendment fails. Did you want to record those in favor?
Yes, please, Chair Gillis, if we could do that, those who are in.
Pardon?
Those who were in favor of the amendment, if they could put their hands up, please. Thank you.
We have Bass, Watson, Blackwell, Rice, Walsh, Rothenberger, Rain, Stamer, and Singh.
Did you get that, Olivia?
Okay, so that takes us back. I think we were still on recommend. Sorry,
As I misstepped last time, I'd like to make an amendment that we leave the automated portion out of this and leave that up to the next board of directors to review their own remuneration and not the automatic, the CPI.
so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Sorry, is there any discussion? Director Quinn?
Is that not contrary to the motion we just passed, Ms. Campbell?
Turn your mic off.
Director Walsh, just so I'm clear, you're only asking that we remove the provision where we built in the automatic increase. Okay, so no, it wouldn't be. It's just, we would remove that provision that going forward, there's an automatic increase.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of Director Walsh's amendment? I see Director Watson, Director Rice, Director Rothenberger, Director Walsh, Director Rain,
Director Bass.
and Director Bass. Opposed? That amendment is defeated.
I'd like to move recommendation number 2.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Directors Watson, Rice, Rothenberger, Walsh, Rain, and Singh,
And Bass.
and Bass, pardon me. Zoom.
Second.
Is there any discussion on recommendation number 3? Director Singh.
Yeah, and I know how challenging discussion is, and I'm trying to be very respectful in my comments. I pose just the perspective of my own way of looking at it, but I do really think that we have to look at remuneration for especially folks in rural areas, metro areas. I really take Director Elliott's comments, to heart around just getting people involved with the process. It is really, really important, but I really do think also that we always get in this pretty it's sticky to have to do it for yourself. So one of the things that I always, and one of the best practices in UBCM guide, I hope the staff do that next year, whoever's around here, is we actually look at a citizens committee or whatever to actually look at recommending, because ultimately it'll always come back to the board anyways. And we did this at the city. I think we actually had a citizens committee. It was a 5-4 vote to actually support the committee. So it's never nice or easy, but it's certainly a way of actually getting citizen feedback and input. And I appreciate Dr. Watson's comments, in that regard. That's all I'll say.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on recommendation number 3? I see none. All in favor? Opposed, if any?
Bass.
Okay, I have Directors Watson, Director Blackwell, Director Rice, Director Schaefer, Rothenberger, Director Walsh, Director Singh, and Director Rain, and Director Bass. So how many is that?
8. Saying what's in the 8. 8, Chair Gillis, that's 8.
Sorry,
8,
opposed?
8 opposed.
Okay, that recommendation is carried. That brings us to the Monty Creek Service Establishment and Loan Authorization Bylaw. There is a recommendation. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Move to.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on recommendation 2? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. I have zoning amendment bylaw 2778. There are 2 recommendations.
Move recommendation 1.
Is there any discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried.
Move recommendation number 2.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? I see none. Oh, Director Stamer, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question to staff. Looking at this application now, that we're looking at another piece of property to be involved in this development. And also noting that there's a list of requirements on our second recommendation. And knowing also how wet that property is there anything else that we should be looking out for in regards to allowing this application, Mr. Vocalo? Because this land has never been developed in the past, and I know how wet it is down on the bottom. So is there anything else that pops up?
No, again, they are adjacent and we were not aware, staff were not aware that the applicant was in negotiations for this second parcel. This isn't more development, so it'll spread it. I think it'll be better if it's a lower or the same density over twice as much land, because then there's more places for water filtration into the groundwater, less chance of erosion and what have you. So again, I think this is a little better than what we had before. The reports, he has to, I mean, this is a lot more work doing this in 2 swoops for us and the applicant. He has to redo all the reports to cover the second parcel now. And when they come back, then, and we'll review them, then second reading can catch any areas of concern.
Thank you. And is there any further discussion? I see none. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. That takes us to reports. We have our CAO's verbal report.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. I just have a few updates for the board today. Firstly, I'd like to introduce our new Deputy CFO, Carla Fox. She's just sitting back here in the against the wall. Carla comes to us. She's a fighter, I think, so everything should be fine. Carla comes to us most recently from the town of Hinton, Alberta, where she worked as the Director of Corporate Services. Carla's first day was just this past Monday with the TNRD. Carla's 15 plus years of experience as a CPA and in local government has been comprehensive and has enhanced her strength working as an influential leader in financial, human resources, and change management. She has held key roles leading teams, facilitating and presenting to boards, staff, and council. We are excited to welcome Carla to the TNRD and our management team, where we know her knowledge, skills, and abilities will be put to great use. So welcome to Carla. Just a few other quick updates. The forensic audit progress has been going very well. In fact, we're about 70% complete right now. By the end of this week, our website is being updated as we speak, and it'll reflect these changes. We continue to be focused in our approach, and I'm very proud of this team behind this effort. Earning back the trust of our residents is extremely important to all of us, and we're rebuilding our policies, procedures, and our operations. In some cases from the ground up, and we need to do it in an effective and efficient way, and of course transparent to our constituents. Our CFO, Mr. Ray, will be providing a more detailed update at the July board meeting with some of those details. Also, you'll find in your blue folder, you'll find the new annual report. This will be made public today. You will find a copy, as I mentioned, and this report is very well done from my perspective and highlights many of our accomplishments, our projects and initiatives that have been completed in 2021. It's also a great tool in educating our residents about our entire regional district and the many services we provide in our vast geography. This project was led by Colton and Mike, along with a significant amount of input from the rest of the organization. But thank you to everyone for their contributions, and your feedback would be greatly appreciated as we get that out to the public. And then finally, just an update on our EOC. We have activated our Emergency Operations Center due to current threat of flooding in many areas of the TNRD. This is mainly driven by the extraordinarily late snow melt in the high elevations, as we all know, of the region, particularly in the North Thompson Basin. Significant rain events are the primary concern over the next weeks, as they could exacerbate the already high water levels in our lakes, our streams, and our creeks. We heard it this morning during the hospital district board meeting, how much rain did come down. Staff have worked to deploy sand and sandbags to many strategic locations throughout the TNRD so that residents can begin protecting their property. And a full list and the map of these locations are on our website. So we're in daily contact with the province, with other local governments in our regional district and our adjacent regional districts. And we'll be making sure we bring information forward as it becomes available. And that's all I have, unless there's any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much, Mr. Hildebrand. Does anyone have questions for our CAO? I don't see any. You're off the hook. That brings us to the UBCM convention director request for meetings with ministers. There is a recommendation. All in favor? Opposed of any? I'm sorry, I didn't ask for discussion. Any discussion? All in favor? Is anyone opposed? That's carried. There's a UBCM resolution for maximum additional dwelling sizes on ALR lands. I think Director Rothenberger might have been behind that.
I'll move the
The recommendation is moved.
Excuse me.
Okay, moved by Director Rothenberger, seconded by Director Walsh. Is there any discussion? I don't see any discussion. All in favor? Is anyone opposed? I see no opposition, Director Rothenberger. Your UBCM resolution has gone forward unanimously. Chase landfill closure license of occupation renewal.
Move the recommendation.
Is there any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Is anyone opposed? That's carried. Regional Planning Services Agreement renewal. There's a recommendation. Second. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Rain.
Just wondering, is there a list of the contribution by the? Maybe I missed it in the report, but I didn't see it. Just if we could maybe send that out.
Yeah, I can send it out. I will be contacting the CAOs if this passes. Each year it's different, and for each area it's different. But typically it goes from a low of a few $600 or $700 for Lytton up to the highest, besides the city of Kamloops that pays the lion's share. It goes to about $22,000. This was 2021 for merit.
Supplementary, I think it's important for the communities to see where they stand in the list. I'm sure. I know people in Sun Peaks will look because the assessments are higher, and they just want to kind of see the fairness across the board.
Thank you, Director Christian.
Thank you. Speaking on behalf of the Lion's Share, we have a motion in the city of Kamloops that we will pay 25% of the costs of the planning function up to a maximum of $250,000. Now, that was done in 2015, and we were always under that, but I'm assuming now the costs of the planning function are taken so that the maximum now cuts in. Is that correct?
I think just the last few years, we were just above the amount, so the cap came in at $250,000.
Thank you.
Good memory.
I can confirm that.
Sorry, Mr. Ray, you said?
Just confirming that statement.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion with respect to the recommendation? I see none. Therefore, all in favor? Is anyone opposed? That's carried. And a request to enter into a section 219 covenant for Whitecroft community use. There is a recommendation. Is there any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. City of Merritt OCP Regional Contact Statement. There's a recommendation. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. 2021 statements of financial information and board remuneration. That's the Sophie matter, isn't it? There is a recommendation. There are two. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. There's a second recommendation. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Strategic Priorities Fund 2022 Capital Infrastructure and Capacity Building Applications. There is a recommendation. Is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. We have a board report of May 2022 building permit activity highlights.
Move for information.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. That takes us to committees. Internal committees. Audit Committee Director Rain.
No meeting, no report. I would suggest, I think people's terms are going to be running down slowly, and we did request meeting to look at the external auditor.
Just gonna say it's on the to-do list.
Okay, thank you. Economic Development Director Roden.
No meeting, no report.
No meeting, no report.
Emergency Management Director Watson.
Although I did not chair this meeting, the minutes are right below the report, and do we have to move them? Nope, okay. Then that's just for your reading pleasure.
Thank you. Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was not, I was listed as being present at that meeting. I was not.
Thank you. Policy Review Committee Director, I guess it'll be Director Walsh. No? Who's doing policy review now? I've got Director Sinclair and she's not here.
Me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Director Roden.
Thank you. Yes, I got bumped up. So we do have some reports there for your edification and reading pleasure, and we also have a recommendation.
I'll second that.
Seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Rothenberger and Director Rain.
And Walsh.
I think actually the recommendation is not quite worded properly. I think it's probably lifted from the previous agenda. It should be that that the board approve board expense policy, not that the committee recommend it. Right?
Yes.
But I do have an amendment to the recommendation. We had a very interesting discussion in the policy committee about per diems and food allotments and so on. And there's a lot of good stuff in the recommendations. There's one that's definitely not so good. And that's with respect to section 2.6. And I'd like to move that section 2.6 be amended to state the per diem rate may not be claimed for any meals that are included as part of an itinerary of a meeting, seminar, conference, or convention that the director participated in, or that was otherwise provided to them.
Second,
This, Mr. Chair, this changes the wording that was proposed and brought forward through the committee, that if a director did not partake of a meal, that director is entitled to go out and buy a meal somewhere else and then claim for it, even if that meal was provided as part of the conference registration fees and so on. And I think that I call it the Bagel Clause because, you know, so in theory, if you go down for breakfast conference and you don't like the bagels because they're too dry or anything, you can just go down to a restaurant and buy yourself a nicer meal. And I don't think that's really in the spirit of what we're doing here. And I think we have to again think about the times that we're in. And it reminds me of the infamous free drinks debate that we had. You know, the details are sometimes what really send the message. And this, unfortunately, if we allow this to take place where you can claim for meals if you simply don't like what you've been given, really sends a really poor message to taxpayers that, again, we're feeling entitled and that if a meal isn't good enough, we're going to get something better and charge the taxpayers for it. That is charging the taxpayer for something the taxpayer shouldn't be charged for, because now they're paying for it again. They've already paid for it through our fees to attend, and now we want them to pay again because we don't like them. I got to say, I think we need to not forget all of the good stuff that we've done, the reforms that we've put in place that really improve the way we do business and the way we conduct ourselves. And if we do something like this, that's proposed today, it really erodes all that good work for such a small thing. I mean, suck it up. If you don't like the muffin, you know, have the muffin anyway, and not go spending additional money on a meal.
So, it's already been said. Thank you. Have anything to add?
Yeah, not directly to the amendment, maybe indirectly. Is the per diem, I didn't see it. Does it say somewhere that the per diem includes meal, taxes, and tips? I mean, if you tip somebody that's not above your per diem, that's included, but I didn't see it anywhere.
Mr. Hildebrand?
It is included. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's explicitly stated, but that's the amount you get. So
Yeah, I think that's the intent,
pay
but
tax,
I
if you
didn't
pay
see
a
it
tip, that's
stated
the amount you
anywhere.
get.
Thank you, Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm getting a little bit disappointed in some of the comments that are being made here in the innuendo that we're not being responsible enough to not only work on behalf of the taxpayers, but also to be thinking of a way of trying to get a per diem just because maybe a breakfast may or may not have been included in a package. I find it absolutely ridiculous. And I also find it insulting that a director would even insinuate that we're actually trying to do that. So I am not going to be supporting this motion. I mean, when we go on conferences and we do those kinds of things, I would expect something that's going to be decent enough to eat. And if there's some reason that you can't have, that isn't provided, or somebody has a dietary issue, I don't see any reason why we're trying to go around the circle with this kind of thing. Director Brown mentioned about dietary situations, and I proposed a friendly amendment to say if that was necessary, we could have a receipt, and that was defeated. So I'm not going to be supporting this one little bit.
Thank you, Director O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Director Rothenberger and or staff, and this goes back into the dietary conversation. Dietary restrictions are getting more and more common. Is there, the way that it's written, is there an override that can be done by the chair or a combination of the chair and CFO or CEO for these when they come up, and such things as a diabetic or gluten-free, and they may not have it, and I just don't think that somebody should have to pay out of pocket when they're out on the TNRD business. And the way that Director Rothenberger, it's stated right now, is devils in the details, is that there is no avenue for that consideration. So I just wonder, through Rothenberger or staff, who would be best to answer.
Thank you, Director Brown.
See you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hildebrand.
First, through you, Mr. Chair, to Director O'Reilly, that's something that we've done some research in and have experienced before as well, where a lot of conferences do cater to that, and things are changing certainly. And some conferences are better than others, where they provide what you need for your dietary needs. And there's going to be some occasions where they simply can't do it. But if from our experience, and I'll maybe let Ms. Campbell speak to it because she was just recently at a conference and had this experience, and I feel like most of them try really hard to make that work. And if they don't, certainly that's an exception that I would feel that could be expensed then, because you weren't able to have that meal for a specific reason. But if I may, Ms. Campbell, just share a quick experience as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hildebrand. So that's been my recent experience. I have dietary restrictions, and so the last 3 conferences I've been to have all been able to accommodate that. But regardless, that doesn't always happen. But I think we're seeing more of that. But certainly we wouldn't expect that if a hotel or a conference was unable to accommodate someone's dietary restrictions, that they couldn't then claim a per diem. So what we're proposing is that if a per diem is claimed, that a note just be made on the claim form as to why that meal was claimed, even though it was actually provided. So the intention of this, how it was originally worded and how Director Rothenberger has proposed it, is not to make exceptions. We feel that would go without saying. And we wouldn't have to explicitly say that we would make exceptions. I think Mr. Ray would probably agree that we would absolutely make exceptions if someone's dietary restrictions were not able to be accommodated. The intention of this is to ensure that, and we're mirroring this off of our own staff policy, and so staff are not able to claim a per diem where they attend a conference or go to a hotel and the meal was provided. And so we're trying to align our board policy with our staff policy and just be a little bit more clear about what can and cannot be claimed, but certainly with exceptions.
And just to add, that's exactly why we brought it forward the way it is because that's exactly what we're expecting out of our staff, and we want a consistency with the board.
Always have.
And I always have done that.
Thank you, Director Brown.
Well, I have 2 comments to make. One of them is, in addition to what staff are saying, is sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. But sometimes when you're in a conference like UBCM, you're meeting with the ministers right at noon or right at another time where they have a meal on the agenda. Or you're having, I don't know, some kind of meeting or connection with some other group. And it's not always the case that you have to suck it up. And I, for one, having the gluten allergies, I would have difficulty sucking up a muffin for breakfast. I have difficulty with the terminology that was used. And I'm one of those that do require meals that are different. And sometimes I get meals with a bun attached to it as part of the sandwich. And there are times when I've said to the person bringing it to me, I can't eat that. And one of them actually said, "Oh, it's just a little piece of bread. Why can't you eat it?" As I said, not everybody can accommodate all the time. There are times that we
aren't available at the time that the meal is served.
Director Watson.
Thank you. In response to Director Stamer and his feeling outraged and insulted that somebody would think that a meal would be expensed and on of the expenses for the conference. It has happened in the past, and although I'm sure nobody in this room would do it, we're making a policy for the future as well. So if you don't lay it out properly, it can happen really easily. So there's no point in being insulted because somebody suggested that we needed to make a rule. It has happened, and it may happen again if we don't construct the rule properly.
I have Director Quinn, Director Singh, Director Schaefer, Director Duty, and Director Roden. And following that, I am going to call the question. I think we've just about exhausted the topic of bagels. Director Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Between the bagels and the muffins and the little pieces of bread, I'm now confused. We're debating the minutes of a meeting that was in committee.
No.
So what exactly are we debating?
There is an expense policy here that we're discussing.
Okay. So this amendment then would change policy. Is that correct? Thank you. I still don't like dry bagels.
Thank you, Director Singh.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. Yeah, I certainly appreciate that both options have problems. So if we create a rule that says no one can, there is allowance for per diems if you don't take the conference meal. Some folks will abuse it, potentially. But the other problem is if and I'm really repeating Dr. O'Reilly, Dr. Brown's comments on this, because number one, I mean, I eat a lot, but I mean, I do have some dietary things that are coming as I age, and I have to be careful about what I'm eating these days. I do eat the bad bagels and muffins and whatever, but if it's got gluten in it, or if I get diabetes eventually, then I'm going to have to be careful. And I just want to speak as somebody who was for 2 years on the UBCM convention committee, and knowing, talking to the caterers there about what they actually have to try to provide for 1,200 delegates who have all these different needs, and you cannot provide something for every particular potential issue, right? Dr. Brown's comments also about minister meetings and stuff that happened these are all real life situations, right? So I would rather we have the policy that's suggested by staff than go down the road of saying some idiot's going to abuse the rule next term. You know, it's going to happen. That is going to be a clear, tight bow on these things. But I think the problem that we're creating with Dr. Rothenberger's amendment, I'm sorry, I'm against all today, Mr. Rothenberger. I don't mean to be. But I mean, I think it's setting us up for a real problem with people who have health issues and other things to do during lunch hours at UBCM or whatever.
Thank you, Director Schaefer.
Can we not make this more explicit and say, except where the director did not partake in the meal for a valid reason? Make it more explicit instead of just saying, you know, if you don't want to partake, we can credit your money, you can take charge for it.
I think that puts staff in a difficult position to evaluate what's considered valid and what's not.
Yep,
So
I
you
would
would
agree
be-
with that,
you'd be
Director
putting
Ray.
it in, you
Or
either have
Mr.
to
Ray.
detail what's valid or not.
Thank you.
Well, to
Director
me-
Duty.
Excuse me. To me, that leaves it open. What you've said here leaves it open, very open.
Thank you, Director Duty.
Long-winded conversation. The choice is you either to partake in the breakfast that is provided for you or the lunch that is provided for you, or you use your per diem, right? Isn't that how it works? I've never charged back for a single meal that I've had apart from the ones that, you know, like if it was away from the ones that were provided at any convention I was at. Because I felt if I didn't like what was there, then that was up to me. I'll just go buy my own. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to get a little closer. I've never charged for a meal. What I generally do is if I don't like what's being served at the convention itself, I go buy a meal and it's on my dime. And that's it. That's my choice. I'm not going to expect the TNRD to pay for that. However, that said, there are people with some very valid concerns with respect to their dietary issues. And if they can't eat what's being provided for them, then perhaps they should be able to go and put in for the per diem. This is really fairly clear. I mean, most people would take advantage of the buffet that's there. I would say probably 90% of them would take advantage of it, and you have a few that decide that they can't. I don't think it's ever really a question of saying, oh, this is crap food, I'm not going to eat this. That's, but if that's the case, then if you don't like it, go to a restaurant, buy your breakfast or buy your lunch or whatever it is and pay for it yourself.
Thank you. And finally, Director Roden.
Thank you. We did have a very interesting conversation about this at Policy Committee. The point was made that no policy can ever cover every possible eventuality or circumstance, ever. There are always going to be people who are unable to partake of a meal that has been provided. And I think the language in the policy can be adapted, except where the director did not partake in the meal for dietary or health reasons. Those reasons will always exist. They will always be accommodated. What I am frankly sickened by is the perception that people will show up at a breakfast or lunch buffet that has been paid for by the taxpayer in the form of their registration fee and say, all these sandwiches have mayonnaise. I can't stand mayonnaise. I'm going out to get something. Or I wanted a hot breakfast tomorrow and all we've got is this continental spread. This isn't good enough. I am reading article after article about food insecurity. I spoke with the director of our food bank in Ashcroft, who said in the last 2 weeks, she has signed up 8 new people. And I would suggest that anyone who feels that the continental breakfast spread at Silga or UBCM is not quite good enough, and they're going to go out and charge something else to the taxpayers, should maybe go and talk to the people crowding our food banks, for whom this would be a massive, fantastic spread. And also, I think the distinction that I've kept circling back around, why I was so uncomfortable with this, to me, there is a difference between being unable to eat something because of dietary or health reasons, which I completely understand, and being unwilling to eat something. I like what Director Duty said, because I hear my mother saying, you will eat what is put in front of you.
Thank you. So at this point, we're discussing Director Rothenberger's amendment. All in favor? 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry? Okay, do you want to read out the amendment, please, Ms. Campbell?
Director Rothenberger, my understanding is that it would go back to what it was previously, which is the per diem rate may not be claimed for any meals that are included as part of an itinerary of a meeting, seminar, conference, or convention that the director participated in or that was otherwise provided to them.
Director Duty?
Just for clarification, I'll probably through to Director Rothenberger. Does that include people that have dietary restrictions?
Director Rothenberger?
Mr. Chair, I think that probably would require an amendment to the amendment. That's not the way my amendment currently reads.
Director Roden?
Amendments to amendments. We're getting into murky waters here, and I need some guidance. Can one make an amendment to an amendment?
Yes.
All right. All right, so I would propose, we are looking at item 2.6 in the policy for everyone who wants to pull it up to follow along. When Tinkerbell rings her bell, you turn the page. The per diem, I would suggest an amendment to Director Rothenberger's amendment that says the per diem rate may not be claimed for any meals that are included as part of an itinerary of a meeting, seminar, conference, or convention that the director participated in or that was otherwise provided to them unless it is for reasons of diet or health.
I'll second.
So any discussion on the amendment to the amendment? I hope not. I hope not. Okay, so all in favor of the amendment to the amendment? I'm not going to count those opposed.
Brown,
Mr. Brown.
I only see,
Okay, so the amendment to the amendment passes. Now let's go back to the original amendment. As amended, yeah. Director Brown?
I just want to note that we just changed 2.6 to exclude those that are elsewhere with ministers or whatever. We haven't said anything about those that aren't available at the time the meal is provided.
Well, your comment is noted. That I take it is not an amendment to the amendment to the amendment. Good. I'm pleased to hear that. So then with respect to Director Rothenberger's amendment, all in favor?
the amended amendment.
As amended, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That passes. Opposed.
Opposed. We have
Director Brown. Those opposed?
Schaefer.
Doesn't matter. It's 14 to 4.
Well, yeah,
But you're recorded.
what they're supposed to do.
want to be recorded.
Okay.
Kyle's still now.
Okay. So that, I hope, deals with Director Walsh.
Yeah, I've got a concern with, I could make a motion, but I'll wait to have a discussion, but it gives a meal per diem. But in the cases of, and I did an example of that in the policy committee, but just, I often don't eat $45 worth of food at supper, like especially at a convention where there's so many snack things and events and everything going on. So it doesn't accommodate anything. There's no option for somebody that, like myself, that may have just a salad at dinner, right? Like, so it's a $15, $20 bill. So can I submit that, or do I just take that upon myself and just not claim $45? Like, so it doesn't give any option. It's too fixed in a sense for me. So to me, if it even just said meal per diems or less, I would be accommodated, because I don't eat breakfast. I'll have a muffin and a coffee that's maybe $9 or something, but I'm not going to claim $25, right? So how do you accommodate without creating a a accounting nightmare? Like, can you say or less, or can you?
Did you want to respond to that in any way, Mr. Ray?
Sure. My preference would not be to go down the road of starting to accept receipts where it does become quite a administrative burden. If it were me, there's nothing forcing me to take 3 per diems per day. So if I ate less, I'm entitled to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And based on what I actually spent that day, maybe I just claim the dinner or just claim lunch and dinner. I can always claim less.
Okay, so you feel it's adequate.
There's nothing forcing you to claim breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day.
Okay. Okay.
Director Laird? Nothing further? So I'm a little confused now, Ms. Campbell. There was a recommendation with respect to the board expense policy 1.1.16. Is that what was amended by Director Rothenberger's amendment?
So Director Rothenberger introduced an amendment to the policy. So now the motion that would go forward would be that the board expense policy 1.1.6.
So that recommendation is still before the board.
Yes, be
So
approved,
moved.
be approved,
Moved the
be approved,
recommendation.
be approved as amended.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Regional Solid Waste Management Committee, Director Schaefer.
No meeting.
Invasive Plants, Director Kershaw.
Do we have to approve the minutes of the meeting? I was not there, so.
No, there is.
Okay, so, just remove the minutes, that's all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thompson-Nicola Regional Hospital District Director Christian.
Long meeting, no report.
Utility Systems Committee, Director Elliott. Thank you. Thompson Headwater Services, Director Quinn. Wells Country Services, Director Schaefer.
The minutes are there for everybody to read, and there's a recommendation I'd like to move. them.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Joint Services Committee, Director Schaefer.
Got a hand up.
Oh, sorry, Director Elliott. Did I miss something?
This is loud enough.
Do we have another set of committee meetings before the end of the year?
Ms. Campbell, what have we got coming up in the way of committee meetings? There are some.
We have some committees meetings in September and committee meetings in October before the election.
Yes. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you. Joint Services Committee Director Schaefer.
No meeting.
Okay, external committees, Fraser Basin Council Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Lots going on in Fraser Basin right now. Pretty crazy stuff, but we did have a meeting of the full board. I was asked to be a panelist among three to discuss fires, floods, disasters and stuff, and offer possible ways to address it in the future and stuff, which we did, and had a very robust discussion. Also, Lytton First Nations in the village has engaged Fraser Basin to look into further steps regarding Lytton. We did have a meeting scheduled. It was canceled to be rescheduled. And so we'll have a first meeting of that group coming up shortly. And that's good for now. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Municipal Finance Authority Director O'Reilly.
No meeting, no report.
Municipal Insurance Association Director Duty.
Well, I wish I had something contentious and exciting to report. I have nothing.
I'm disappointed too. Shuswap Watershed Council Director Crow.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have a report.
Oh, no.
Director Christian and I attended the Shuswap Watershed Council. Request is being sent from the council asking BC Parks to undertake a feasibility study regarding black and gray water disposal from private boating to see if this service could be provided by BC Parks on Shuswap and Merrill Lake, as it's not a viable commercial service. Water quality monitoring is underway across the Shuswap as well. A presentation by Mr. Don Holmes on behalf of the Adams Lake Indian Band regarding their applying fertilizer in Adams Lake to enhance the food supply, which is plankton, for juvenile sockeye salmon to increase their growth and survival before they migrate to the ocean. The program has shown good results, and juvenile salmon are observed to be double in size compared to pre-fertilization. This program is ongoing again this year.
Thanks very much. Kamloops Airport Authority Director Roden.
Thank you. The society met last Thursday. Work is proceeding on lighting out at Fulton Field. This is not because of safety issues, but because the current lighting is obsolete and has been scheduled for replacement for some time. They are searching for a new food vendor who will be able to provide better food service, quality, etc. at the airport. They are still pursuing more direct flights to more locations. Edmonton, Victoria, and Toronto are the top three with a bullet. And if you know anyone who is a pilot, this is an excellent time to be a pilot. We heard a lot about pilot poaching. I do not mean as in cooking. I mean as in reaching out to other airlines and stealing them for your airline, because it was explained that pilots would rather be flying a 737 between fairly large destinations than flying the milk run from, say, Kamloops to Prince George. So good time to be a pilot.
Thank you. I don't think I'll retrain. Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Director Singh.
Thank you, Chair Gillis. There was, I think, Director Graham, Director Laird, Director Brown, Director myself, Director Christian, Director Bass, who went to FCM with it, and Councillor Sarai from Kamloops. And fun fact, it was held this year in Regina, Saskatchewan, and one of the biggest convention centers I've ever seen in any town I've ever been to, which was this massive place with golf carts. And I didn't check my colleagues' Fitbits, but I got about 12,000. Oh, Dr. Stamer was there too, of course. Sorry, Dr. Stamer, I missed that. Who else? Did I miss anybody? I don't want to do that. That's very bad missing him. The FCM, we were reminded the FCM represents about 2,000 communities, 90% of the Canadian population. The priority issues discussed at the convention this year revolved around a stronger intergovernmental relationship with all the orders of government, but particularly the federal government. And we talked a lot about this idea of making sure our funding streams in the federal government are not only as secure as they are now, but even enhanced. So doubling the Canadian Building Funds, part of the agenda there for sure. At the convention, our CMP costs came up, adaptation of climate change, and a massive focus on housing. So all the federal keynotes, I sent the board this report I'm giving, so I won't give the whole, but it basically lots of discussion on housing, housing driven by immigration, housing driven by affordability costs for people. It was quite a big thing. I had some good chats with the folks in the Green Municipal Fund, and I've been sharing the FPM, as you know, the Environment Committee there, and so they were talking about the new strategic plan, but also around sustainable, affordable housing in more rural areas. There was resolutions plenary there. 4 resolutions. The rural plenary. We talked about aging in place in rural communities, infrastructure, emergency management, climate action, rural transit, broadband internet, cell service, and federal funding specifically for rural communities. And I was thankful to be acclaimed again to the FCM board of 75. That was actually an acclamation this time, not an election. I'm not sure what that says, but anyways, that was there. And again, I would offer to any of the board members, if there's any specific interest or questions that you have that I can get convention information on or funnel you the right contact at FCM. It's a very responsive organization to our needs, so I'm happy to do so. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Singh. Community Energy Association Director.
Director Quinn had a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Director Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank Director Gray for being able to go to FCM in my place at short notice. Thank you.
Thank you for the spot.
Thank you. Community Energy Association Director Blackwell.
No meeting, no report.
Okay, I don't know what you folks want to do. It is now 10 after 3. Frequently we break around this point, but we are getting close, I think, to the end of the agenda. Would you like to have a break right now or push on through? I think people are saying carry on. Okay, so we have correspondence. 1, 2, 3, 4 items of correspondence for information only. Any discussion? All in favor? It's carried. New business from members. Direct. Wow. Probably should have had a break. Director. So Director, what have I got? I've got Director Quinn, I've got Director Schaefer, I've got others with new business. Director Stamer.
We need a break.
Rothenberger.
We need to take a break, I think. We're losing our audience.
Yeah. I think we will take that 10-minute break at this point. So I've got Directors Quinn, Schaefer, Stamer, and Rothenberger. Is there anyone else with new business?
I think someone did, but they went to water.
Well, I didn't mean, I wasn't referring to that kind of business, Director Roden. I've got.
Too much information. Yes, exactly. The family show.
1 minute, your 1 minute warning.
Oh.
We did receive, yeah, that was done. We received the correspondence.
Yep.
And now we're at new business.
And we had a whole.
There we go. And I have on the list directors Quinn, Schaefer, Stamer, and Rothenberger. Is there anyone else with new business so I can put you on the? Okay, with the possibility of Director Kershaw. Okay, Director Quinn.
I'll just be short. Thank you for the flowers that you guys sent me over our recent loss in our family. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Quinn. Director Schaefer.
I would like to make a motion to write a letter of recognition for the fire chief, Michael Savage of Blackpool and Little Fort Fire Departments, Linda Selby and Pearl Maloney. All three were nominated from the Clearwater area and awarded the Canadian Platinum Jubilee emblem. This emblem marks the 70th anniversary of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II accession to the throne. On June 12th, MP Frank Caputo honored all the recipients and told their stories at a special ceremony. These pins are given to those who have demonstrated the qualities of public service, dedication, and sacrifice. All three persons have gone above and beyond what is asked of them and is very deserving of this award. I feel we should send a letter of appreciation and congratulations to each nominee.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried. Director Stamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick things. It was, I think, pretty apparent to all of us, some of the concerns and some of the challenges we have with our healthcare system throughout the region. And I know that Interior Health is doing their very best to try to get over some of these things, but there's a couple of things I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention. First up is that the District of Barrier has sent a letter to Minister Dix in regards to ambulance services. And just quickly, what the letter basically talks about is that, we're very concerned with the changes to the full-time ambulance staff and some of the primary care paramedic situations that's occurring. What's changed in the service of medical response in the past year that suddenly our EMR qualified staff are not qualified for those full-time positions, and the situation is getting worse. So we've sent a letter to the minister trying to see if we can get some changes to the BC ambulance service, knowing that we've got some significant shortfalls. And the second thing is that we have a resolution that we are putting forth to UBCM, and we're hoping that other communities not only will be able to support us at UBCM, but also maybe would be thinking about this along the same lines. And I'll just quickly read it out. Whereas it is generally recognized that the ambulance service in BC is heavily urban focused. However, increasing the number of other first responder service calls to make up for the BCES staffing shortfall should not come at the expense of a reasonable level of BC ambulance service in rural communities. And whereas there has been little or no increase in provincial funds to independent first responder societies, municipal fire rescue departments, and rural RCMP staffing increases over the past several years, compromising these rural emergency response service levels in many rural communities throughout BC. There be resolved that the government of BC review its rural BC ambulance resource modeling to ensure that adequate resources are available to properly service rural communities. One of the reasons why we're doing this is because a few years ago at UBCM, we did have a recommendation and it was unanimously supported by UBCM to try to increase the funding, particularly on our highways. And case in point, last night we had a fatal just north of Little Fort. It closed the highway for approximately 10 or 11 hours. Mayor Blackwell, something like that. And Barrier had to respond to that outside our municipal and fire boundaries. They were there till 2 o'clock in the morning. It was a fairly extensive accident. Victim services counseling is going to have to be provided on what they actually experienced at that accident. And then today there was another triple fatality in Vinsula. Director Blackwell, unfortunately, was just north of that at the same time. Again, Barrier went and responded to that. And we've got some significant shortfalls in the way we're trying to deliver these critical services up and down the valley and in the region. And we're hoping that everyone here is going to do their very best to try to support not only what we're doing, but everyone else is doing in this room to try to push the provincial government to a different funding model, because we can't run this on volunteers anymore.
Thanks, Director Stamer, Director Blackwell, and then Director Roden.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about ambulance service and all that sort of thing, but one point I'd just like to reiterate on Director Stamer's comments is that every time the ambulance is late or away, the download on volunteer first responders, the toll that's taking is scaring away, chasing away, affecting the mental health of our volunteer crew of first responders. And I think that is a cost that these people did not sign up to take.
Thank you, Director Roden.
Thank you. Second to Director Stamer. I hear you. We've requested from the Village of Ashcroft a meeting with the ministry about this very issue, because we are finding that in Ashcroft, our highway rescue, it's all volunteers. They are encountering things that most people would not be able to deal with. It is taking a toll, and like you, we've come to the conclusion, or Director Blackwell, we cannot run this with volunteers anymore. We simply cannot. The province is downloading this onto the backs of not only small communities, but volunteers who cannot deal with this on a continued basis. So something has to be done.
Thank you, Director Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ambulance thing, and I understand where Director Stamer is coming from. The ambulance thing has wider effects. When a Clearwater ambulance goes to Barrier to cover, the Blue River ambulance goes down and leaves no coverage. And it also goes the other way. When Belmont goes down, it goes to McBride. The Blue River ambulance in the past has gone as far as Slim Creek between Prince George and McBride. It's gone to 100 Mile House, and it comes to Kamloops to serve in Kamloops, which leave us the North Valley completely exposed. And the system is not working, and it needs improvements. And I really have nothing more to say on it. We've got good people working, but they kind of get burned out over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stamer. Are you on to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if we want to, I mean, I can make a motion that we can send a letter to the ministry, but I'm a little bit disappointed when we had the last letter that we sent on the 14th of February. It took almost 4 months to get back as a response. So I'm not sure if it maybe makes more sense for all our individual municipalities to write their own letter and try to be able to be, as a collective group, try to get some action, because we're doing everything we possibly can. We've had discussions with BC Ambulance. We've been discussing with looking at ways of allowing the first responders not only the ability to respond to these incidences, but also to transport patients, because as right now they're not allowed to. And we're trying to get that changed as quickly as we possibly can. But I agree with Director Quinn. There's a lot of times when we have gaps in the system where we have absolutely no coverage from basically Heffley Creek to Blue River. And that's something that we've got to fix, and fix quickly.
Thank you. I saw Ms. Campbell nodding her head vigorously there with respect to some of the things he said. It seems to me, did we not discuss the possibility of having Barrier's letter distributed to each regional district? But did we not have some discussion about that? I'm sorry, I'm a little vague on the details, Ms. Campbell.
That's why I was nodding my head, because I believe that Barrier has done that. they've copied all of the UBCM members, which would be all municipalities and regional districts. And so that'll be left to other municipalities and regional districts if they would also like to bring forward a similar resolution to send a letter to the minister.
Okay, thanks very much. Director Brown.
I was just going to mention that the ambulance service in Merritt is the same, except we have Highway 8, Highway 5A, Highway 5 to Kamloops, Coquihalla to Hope, Coquihalla to Kelowna, that our ambulance is on a regular basis. We very seldom have an ambulance available in Merritt.
Thank you. Director Rothenberger, new business?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's a letter, a proposed letter in our blue folders, but it's a couple of pages long. So if you haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, I'll just quickly summarize the situation, which is that following last year's wildfires, the province has commissioned for each wildfire geohazard reports at a fairly high level. And these are forwarded to the regional district, which then notifies any homeowners that may be within an area where it's felt there could be a risk due to erosion and so on, particularly upslope from a property. And we have examples where property owners want to take out a building permit to improve their property, but they can't receive that permit until a detailed geohazard report is provided. These detailed reports, we have examples of them being quoted as costing tens of thousands of dollars. In one case, for example, somebody wants to build a garage and it would cost roughly $40,000 to get one of these reports done. And the province, to this point, won't absorb the cost of that. They expect the property owner to do it. So this puts a lot of property owners in a very difficult situation for something that was totally beyond their control, obviously, in the wildfire season. So the proposal is that, and I'll make the motion that a letter be written to the Minister of Public Safety to request support for residents impacted by post-wildfire geohazard assessments.
I'm sorry, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Watson?
Can we make sure that letter isn't just about the wildfires of 221? Because I have residents that are dealing with land slumping down after wildfire BC burnt off the mountain near their place in 2017. So let's not determine a year in that letter, please. And thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Director Kershaw, did you have new business?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. On June 8th, Director Schaefer and I attended a community forum at Cheval. And these used to be covered by the board. Now I don't see it on listed meetings. So I need board permission for us to claim mileage and stipends for that day.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Director Rice.
Yeah, I'm just pleased to report that after a 4-year absence, we had recently had the training done and 5 first responders certified in Spence's Bridge, which really is a good time to have that happen. And under the tutelage of our new trustees and our volunteer fire department and new fire chief, Dylan, it was a welcome addition to our community. The year they left 4 years ago, they had 47 calls that year. And unfortunately, we lost a couple of people, but the fact of the matter, they were getting about a call a week. So it's good to have it back. And the last thing I'd like to mention real quickly is since July 1st of last year, all our emergency personnel and crews that are working as we speak and will be for a couple of years to come have been had to be fed and taken care of and stuff like that. And We've been able to keep the restaurant open because that's the only thing that really amenity that can do that. And recently, my wonderful wife was awarded Citizen of the Year because she was part of that. I was not part of that. All I did was wash dishes, but she was part of that. And I found out she was nominated by a couple people for Citizen of the Year. So I just wanted to make note of that it was highly deserved after what she's done since the fires and the floods, and continues to make dinners and lunches every night at 5:30 as we speak. So I just wanted to give her a little bit of recognition for that because it's well deserved. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That appears to be it for new business. That takes us, I'm sorry, Director Crow. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm pleased to say that the Village of Chase is now signed on with Voyant Alert, and we should be up and running by sometime next week. Training just took place for staff, so we'll have that up and running.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, that takes us to question period. And I see no hands raised in the gallery, which moves us to item number 13, the final item on our agenda today, which is a notice of motion presented by Director O'Reilly.
Move the motion.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I think we'll start with Director O'Reilly to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. And I just want to address a few things up front since putting this motion forward and just hearing from different directors and just kind of getting a better understanding of what the intent of this is. The intent of this notice of motion is not to split up the TNRD into 2, 3, or 4 regional districts. It's not to split off peripheral areas or regional districts or municipalities. And it's not the intent to leave things status quo. The intent is to form a working group to look at the boundaries that are in place now that were arbitrarily drawn on a map in 1968 that have not been reviewed since that time. Obviously, TNRD has done some internal boundary realignments with how electoral areas line up, but our main boundaries have not been reviewed from that point. And at this point, our board is set to grow. And by 2 things, one by population growth that we know is coming and happening. And so this board is going to get bigger than what it is today, as well as having First Nations representation at the regional district level. And that has been signaled by the province that will be coming as well. And we need to prepare for that. And so the working group's job would be to look at the boundaries. And there's basically 2 main questions that I'm hoping to be answered is, do the current boundaries that the TNRD have today provide the best level of service to the residents of the TNRD? And does the current board size today and boundaries allow the board to provide the best level of governance to the residents of the TNRD? And that's what I'm hoping to address and to have looked at. And I think if the answer for anybody around this table is no to those questions, or we don't know, that I implore you to vote in favor of this motion to explore what we're providing today. Are we doing it the best way possible? That goes back to our strategic priorities of providing good governance. And I truly believe, and this isn't pointing fingers at anybody's staff, administration, politicians over the last 50 years, is we should look at this, and it should be something we should ask that question to ourselves. And just to lastly, to touch on the timing of this and how this came to be. But I was actually approached by somebody in Kamloops about 3 months ago that told me they were part of a regional district boundary realignment on Vancouver Island going back in 2006, which I had no idea. And when I had talked to other directors and some staff, they really had no idea, that had happened and the process, how they got there. I further got put in contact with the CAO of the regional district going back in 2006. That was part of how the boundary realignment happened, and started learning more and found out that through provincial guiding documents, the province states that they will look at boundary realignment, but specifically it needs to be led by the regional district. And so the province isn't going to do this. And so that's what I'm hoping to do today. And yeah, so I'll leave it. I'd love to hear. And again, if somebody here can tell me today how those boundaries were done and how they're serving the best way, our people the best way possible, I'd love to hear it. I'm open ears, but I think this warrants the conversation and to really ask ourselves those two questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Director O'Reilly. I would imagine there may be some discussion. I have Director Elliott, Director Quinn, and Director Rothenberger and Director Rice so far.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask Director Riley if your boundaries you're talking about are within the regional district? Is that what you want to look at? Moving the boundaries of the 10 electoral areas?
No.
Mr. Chair, through the Director Elliott, this is to look at our exterior boundaries, our peripheral boundaries.
Okay, so in other words, you're going to make 2 regional districts.
Mr. Chair, through to Director Elliott.
Yeah, please, it's your notice of motion. Please go ahead and respond to Director Elliott.
If you don't want me to go through, that's okay. I'm good with that. No, I have no preconceived notion of what this is going to show back. And frankly, it may come back saying that this is the best way possible, just given the way that the geography and the populations line up. And that may very well be the response that comes back from the working group. But as I've requested, that the working group is made up of both municipal directors and electoral area directors to discuss this. And I think the outcomes, there's 3 potential outcomes: is to leave the boundary as is, to potentially look at some peripheral electoral areas or municipalities peeling off into other regional districts, if it makes sense, or the other option being potentially 2, 3, 4, 5 regional districts, which sounds crazy sitting around this table. But that's what happened on Vancouver Island. I don't think that's probably the way it's going to go, but I don't want to presuppose what this group is going to come up with. But it's worth having that conversation. Obviously, financial implications and why staff are part of this working group need to be taken into consideration as to who can help pay the bills and make sure that people are still getting the services possible. And again, that very well may be the way it is today, but I think it's worth having that conversation. Thank you.
Okay, and I just wanted to tell you that we did have an exchange of boundaries within the regional district in the late 70s, early 80s, where we took C and D and made it into O. So that was one of the because of that very thing that you're talking about. But I personally am not against you doing this, but I think you're doing it with the wrong board. I think that we really need to let the next board take this over, take a look at it, because Tobiano, maybe Savona, a couple of places like that, if they become municipalities, then this board goes to 30 people. And I also know one thing about the island community, the regional districts, and that was because the regional districts were told to either get along or go their separate way, which they were done by the government. So I happen to know a couple of things like that. And I'm not against your motion, Director. I think you're at the wrong time, and I think there will be people that need to look at it from a new perspective.
Through to Director Elliott is, the timing of this was certainly something that I considered and looking to put it forward if I were to be reelected to the next board. However, if I work backwards from the next provincial election being in Q3 of 2024 and a new board to come in and take over, the timing wouldn't work. The best result for the new board and new working group wouldn't have a result until sometime in Q1 of 2024. And that would leave upwards of only 4 or 5 months to bring that to the province and have a province make a decision and look at it. And that, to me, I don't think anything really happens within a 4-month window of a provincial election. Therefore, you got another government elected. So we'd be looking at least 2 to 3 years down the road if we miss this window of opportunity, which is why I've put it forward today.
Okay, thank you. Director Quinn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Historically, on Vancouver Island, I believe that the directors are talking about Courtney and Camel River, and they were at each other's throats, literally. And that's how that division took place. There are also heavily populated areas where this isn't. And I'm not quite sure where it would go. Historically, the boundaries of this regional district were set up, I think it was in 67, and the boundaries were tied to the catchment area for a pulp mill in the interior. That's how we ended up with this boundary, and it all fed into the Kamloops pulp mill. And that's where it's at. There's all adjustments once in a while. I have some difficulty. I hear all the time, and I heard it here today, is that, oh, Kamloops pays 60% of the board. That's true, but not all of it. Of the 10, so I counted 10 services to which the city of Kamloops contributes, and it works out to $6,695,816. That's for the 10 services. I didn't include planning and I didn't include waste management because I know they're not complete. And that translates to $66.96 per person. We'd like to give money out on a per capita basis. Area B contributes $191,101 to that same area, which translates to $786.42 per capita. We pay our way. We pay our way around this table. The other services are done and paid for by the areas themselves. For example, you do not contribute to Area B, Blue River Water. You don't apply to contribute to stuff like our parks. There is a regional park in my area, which we all do, which we originally paid for that until when Director Rothenberger was here, we got the boys in and made it all a regional function. So
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Director Quinn, but I think these are questions that should
Yeah.
more appropriately be addressed by the working group if
Yeah.
and when there's a motion.
that's fair enough. I understand that. I just want to point out that if the board chooses to do that, that's fine. But there are other ramifications, and it includes opening up the door to taking areas that may not want to stay here and go to other areas. An argument could be made that Area B could fit in with Fraser Fort George. And I think Director Watson makes it quite clear that she'd rather be in the Caribou. She said it here today. So.
Did I say that?
Yeah, and you said it many times before.
Well,
No, we're arguing, I'm just making a point.
I'm not going to entertain an I said, she said, he
Thank
said,
you.
or they said. Your point is
Yeah,
taken,
thank you. And that's
Director
all I
Quinn.
wanted to say. So if the board chooses to do that, I would tend to support Director Elliott in saying it really is something a new board should look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Rothenberger.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I admit I was kind of skeptical when I saw what Director O'Reilly was proposing, because I thought, well, what's broken? And should we do something just because it's been done somewhere else? Are there actual things? Is there a problem that needs fixing? But then I started thinking about the map and the boundaries, and I thought about the Lafarge finger and how little sense that makes when you're drawing lines on a map. And why is it there? Why does our boundary go along and then also zit, zit, and then, well, we know it's because the city liked having the tax revenue. And then I thought about Heffley Creek, which has always been within the city since amalgamation. But Heffley Creek, for example, has a wonderful community hall that the city chooses by and large not to support. It's supported through electoral area P, which makes some sense because many, if not most of the members who make use of that hall are within area P rather than within city boundaries. I'm thinking that it shouldn't be just external. There needs to be an internal review. And there's nothing wrong with looking at electoral area boundaries and seeing if they should be adjusted between one electoral area and another. I think municipal boundaries within the regional district should be examined as part of this exercise to see if something better can be done with those boundaries, with a view to tax revenue fairness and economic implications and natural geographical boundaries and so on. And then you have been mentioning the kind of unwieldiness of the size of the board. Well, we aren't nearly as unwieldy as the legislatures or, you know, the House of Commons, for example, but you do have a point that the larger we get, perhaps there's an effect on efficiency. There's one way to rectify that, and that's to reduce the number of city directors on the board. Serious, I'm serious. We're way overweight with city directors because I understand there's a formula for population. But do we, you know, is it right that there are so many city directors and who so outweigh the number of, well, every other electoral area or municipality has one director and you guys have a half a dozen of them. So is that something that should be considered? If you're going to talk about the size of the board as part of this exercise, then don't cut it off at any particular area. Like, look at all the possibilities for reducing the size of the board. So I'm trying to avoid making yet another amendment today. So I'll ask Director O'Reilly if he perhaps in considering the unquestionable wisdom of what I say, add that into the understanding of how this this committee would conduct the review.
Yeah, I mean, and sorry, through the chair, your point's taken in the sense that, you know, just a boundary review could be left. It doesn't have to be specifically external or internal. But when we talk about the amount of municipal directors around this table, obviously the city of Kamloops, on my time on this board, and I don't know the last time, but weighted votes haven't been used, but that is somewhat of an insurance policy for the taxpayer of Kamloops that is paying a large portion of the TNRD budget. Obviously not everything, as Director Quinn had said, but it still provides us that weighted vote, and maybe that's something that changes and we were to get more votes, and that's something that this working group could all be part of the final result and final product that comes out.
Thank you, Director Rothenberger.
Yeah, and I know that. But my question is,
The motion has been moved and seconded. Microphone?
but the motion has been made and I'm asking about the parameters that this committee would use to review it. I think it's entirely in order. I can make an amendment if that's required, but I just say, I'm just wondering what Director O'Reilly's intentions would be with the scope.
Can I make a suggestion, Director O'Reilly? Where your resolution says the working group will work with staff to report back to the board with a recommendation of either initiating a restructure, which may include adjustments to TNRD boundaries. And I'm wondering if we could just add the words as a friendly amendment, which may include adjustment to the TNRD internal and external boundaries. Would that be okay with you?
Yes.
Does that work for you, Director Rothenberger? Good. Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Interesting conversation. And certainly the mapping is, 68 and ALR mapping, what goes back to 1972. They're all in their 50-year anniversary or more. And I think when you have mapping that old for a number of reasons, it should be revisited, and because it goes to decision making down the road. And in this case, we do have, I believe, the biggest board in the province and stuff. And as Director O'Reilly states, it will be second biggest. Who's the biggest? Metro? I thought we were bigger than them. It doesn't matter. He stated that there isn't a vision that it might even be bigger going down the road. We might be up to 30 or something like that. But I just think it's worth the conversation having to talk about it. I do agree with Director Elliott that even though you've sort of done the work, the homework on the timing, Director Riley. I think, it's exactly 4 months to the election. And if this was brought up as at the first board meeting after the new board was brought to the forefront, it would be a little under 5 months, maybe 5 months difference in the timing. And I just think this is a conversation we should have with the new board. To me, it's a year process or more to even get to a point where you're sort of getting serious about maybe having some solutions or some answers and some options and stuff. So that's sort of what I feel about it, is probably it's worth waiting that extra 5 months and dealing with it and having the new board deal with this. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Laird.
I just have a question around the cost of putting I don't know if anything's in the budget for it, or if it's something that the staff has time for. When I talk to staff members, they're already going pretty well flat out, so I just like a comment from the staff as to where this might be funded.
Yeah, I think Mr. Hildebrand will respond to that, but my understanding is we could initially choose the members of the committee, but it's highly unlikely that anything is really going to happen on this before the election in any event. That's because of staff pressures. But Mr. Hildebrand, could you comment, please?
You're correct in those comments. We are 4 months away, and certainly we got a lot of work between now and then to do. This certainly, I think if it moves forward, we could certainly pull that group together and maybe conversations could happen, but I don't think there'd be any decisions or anything going forward until the new board's in place.
Thank you. And it would seem to me then, if we are going to follow Director O'Reilly's suggestion of a working group of 12, that probably, given the numbers I'm hearing, following the election, you'll be down to a working group of 6, and you're going to be reappointing some members. It would make no sense whatsoever to appoint members who have already declared they're not going to run in the next election. But it seems to me that you might find yourself appointing some new working group members shortly after the election. But I don't think that's the end of the world either. Director Laird. No, I'm sorry, Director Watson.
Thank you. I actually think that the timing is right for this, because it would give those of us at this table who have knowledge of the history and how things work, the opportunity to get our thoughts into this working group. And then we may choose to leave, or we may not be reelected. And then the basis of the history is there for the newly electeds to take it from there. I think it makes sense.
Okay, Director Christian, Director Holderman, Director Duty, and Director Quinn. Oh, okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If this meeting ever ends, I'm due to go to the Federal Electoral Boundary Redistribution Commission this afternoon. And they are looking at the boundaries of the federal constituencies. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because things have changed. They're doing that because populations have changed and areas of commerce have changed. And they do it fairly regularly. And so does the provincial government. And I think the suggestion that Director O'Reilly is putting forward is simply a inquiry to look, as have things changed since 50 years have passed since the TNRD was developed. And insofar as Director Rothenberger's concern about the Lafarge piece, if it's that big of an issue to him, he can take it back. It hasn't worked out so well for us. So but I say that a bit in jest, but we talked earlier on about the city of Kamloops providing 25% of the planning function to a cap of $250,000. We do get something from that. We get the fringe area plan, but I suggest to you that the amount that we contribute also helps for planning in other parts of the regional district, and helps make a dynamic planning department. We do that because we believe that we benefit by having all of the other electoral areas and the other municipalities supporting Kamloops. And you do support Kamloops, and for that, we pay 64% of the general fund of operating this board. But by, if we want to start getting down the road of nickel and diming, we can start taking addresses of everybody that shows up at the Canada Games pool for a swim, or everybody that wants to come skating at Sandman Center. We have no intention of doing that because I believe that this board has a function. I believe perhaps we've lost our way a bit, but I think that there's a function as a regional entity that will strengthen the economy of all of us. So, for that reason, I think there's nothing wrong with us taking a look at our boundaries, our representation by population, both internal and external. And I think that that's just good business practice.
Thank you for that, Director Christian, and I couldn't agree with you more, but I am a little concerned if we do get into the nickel and diming and people from Pritchard have to pay to swim in your pool, we will be imposing a tax on people from Kamloops who come to hunt in the Pritchard area, so. Director Polderman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I sort of wonder if this committee makes suggestions on boundary changes, whether a municipality is going to give up part of its, let's say, its area to go into a regional district. I just sort of have some serious concerns about the willingness to accept these type of changes that might be suggested by this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Duty.
Thank you, Chair. It never ceases to amaze me how we can take a real simple item and complicate the hell out of it. It's a simple request. Let's just take a look at what we have, see whether or not there are changes that might make us more efficient in the long run. Things, as Director O'Reilly stated, things could remain the same. Maybe we find out that this is the best possible option that we have, or we may be looking at some other alternatives. But frankly, where's the harm in looking at it? And whether it takes 6 months or whether it takes 1.5 years is immaterial. The point is if we put a group together to take a look at this and come up with some answers down the road, then we're better off for it.
Thanks, Director Duty. Director Singh, you're the last one.
Yeah, just building on a bit Dr. Duty and Dr. I think it's simple, but it's also very bold. And that's why I like it. I think the conversations have to start. And so, I've been here for a long time. I am kind of attached to the sort of structure we have now and the map we have now, but I think it's, the point that it hasn't been done, and there's no actual structural review that happens on a regular basis to see what happens. That doesn't make sense to me as a long-term strategy, right? So I think Dr. O'Reilly has actually put forward on this table something to be quite transformational, or it could just confirm what we have now, somewhere in between. But the value of those conversations, those are really important conversations to have. And we don't have them often enough, right? So as someone who's always talking about innovation in our system, and innovation always scares folks. Now we're starting to talk about what we're going to get into, but let's not talk about that. Let's just get into it, and then we'll start talking about boundary exchanges and whatever, right? And I was elected to the city of Kamloops, but I was appointed to this board. The CEO at the time said, "You are a regional district director." So I care in this table for the whole region. And I will continue to do so as long as I'm here. So I think it's important for us to do that in a way that actually is meaningful. So I applaud my colleague for doing that. He's going to be doing this a lot longer than I am, hopefully, and he'll have better fruits for some of the work that we kind of get done. So it's awesome.
Thank you. So, did you wish to say anything more, Director O'Reilly?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to respond to a couple of comments, and then I'll close. But this board, as recently as an hour ago, has made decisions for the coming board with regards to remuneration and hospital district remuneration. We can't just be worried about an election day. We need to still continue on and drive the regional district forward and the corporation of the regional district forward. And it was commented of having 12 people on this working board. It's stated in there a maximum of 12. And a minimum of 6, so it doesn't need to go to 12. In closing, I just go back to the whole hope of this.
do the current boundaries, internal or external, allow the TNRD to provide the best level of service to residents of the TNRD? And does the current boundaries and current board size allow the board to provide the best level of governance to the people of the TNRD? If your answer is no, or you don't know, or you're not sure, I implore you to vote in favor of this motion so we can start down this path. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to weigh in on this myself, but I don't think it's going to be necessary. All in favor of Director O'Reilly's notice of motion? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is your hand up, Director? Right, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, I think. Opposed? Director Quinn, Director Polderman, Director Schaefer. I see no others. That is carried. Thank you for the effort that you've put into this, Director O'Reilly. I know this didn't come just right off the top of your head. So thank you on behalf of all of us. We thank you for that. I would entertain a motion. I'd like that motion to adjourn. We stand adjourned.